Hi everybody. This video, which I'm recording in September of 2023, is designed to kind of supersede anything you've seen in the past dealing with color management, tone mapping, working with iPhone HDR footage in Premiere. So if you've seen some of my other videos, just know that this is the newest information as of September 2023. And I'm also going to be covering some features that are coming in 2024 in the near future. So to get started, I want to take a moment and just talk about some of the settings that have existed in Premiere. So a couple of things to note of what I'm doing in Premiere today. In the General tab, I do have display color management turned on, and because I'm looking at this on an extended range monitor, something that can handle HDR, I actually have my extended dynamic range monitoring turned on as well. This means that when I'm working on my MacBook Pro laptop screen, which is an XDR display from Apple, it gives me the actual HDR values. Everything can look really, really nice and bright. If I'm using a different type of a monitor, I'm not going to be able to see that. And in fact, those HDR values are typically going to look kind of washed out. Okay, now, that's just kind of setting the baseline here. What I wanted to talk about today is the fact that tone mapping is now built directly into every sequence in Premiere. It's a simple checkbox you can turn on and off. And the best thing about it is what that is designed to do is take your footage and stretch it, pull it, push it, do whatever it needs to do to make it aesthetically pleasing in the timeline that you're currently editing. Let me show you. This is all footage that was shot on an iPhone, and the iPhone 12 that I was shooting with actually had the HDR checkbox enabled. So all of my footage is high dynamic range footage from the onset. Now, you're probably looking at this screen recording and going, that looks really, really blown out. And if we look over here on my scopes, you can see, in fact, that 0 to 100 nits is the typical range of standard dynamic range footage. And you can see that most of this image is way above 100, going all the way up on this log scale from 100 to 1000 nits. So this will look great on an HDR monitor, but unless you're editing in an HDR world, it's probably going to look very, very blown out. And in fact, this screen recording, what you're seeing on YouTube, is probably looking pretty blown out. So what I want to do here is, with my sequence selected, I'm going to go to Sequence Settings, and I'm going to come down here. Now, I've created a Rec 2100 PQ timeline so that I can cut this and I can create a version of this to display on my HDR television. But what about standard dynamic range? What about uploading something that'll just look good on YouTube? Well, that's where I want to check this box here marked Auto Tone Map Media. And when I turn this on and I change my working color space to Rec 709, which is kind of the broadcast SDR standard, and click OK, you'll notice that everything is now dropping down below 100. It's kind of taking the footage and it's pushing it down into that space so that it will look acceptable in this particular environment. Now, once you do something like this, you might also want to start to play with color a little bit, pull out some additional contrast. I'm adding an adjustment layer here. If I go to my Lumetri color panel, you'll see that there's some adjustments that are happening to some of these settings, bringing the highlights down, bringing the shadows down to kind of bring out some more detail into the rocks and things. So with this adjustment layer and the fact that I'm tone mapping the values, keeping them within that 0 to 100 range means that things are going to look really, really nice for my standard dynamic range. You may have seen stuff in the past about having to go into the clips, turn the clips into 709 clips and add a LUT and do all these other things. That's all past us now. You should be able to create a Rec 709 timeline, turn on tone mapping, and get pretty good looking values right out of the gate working inside of Premiere with your HDR footage. Now, this also works the other direction if I am working with log values. What I mean by log footage is it's pretty standard on a lot of cameras that shoot RAW to shoot in kind of a log space where everything has that sort of milky look to it. And in fact, if I go into a timeline that I have here, this is kind of an example of what I'm talking about here. There's no real, I don't know what to say here. The image doesn't pop at this point. And that's because this footage is designed to really protect the headspace and the tail so that an experienced colorist can come in and kind of pull and stretch and tweak the footage to get it to look really good. But if I'm in a hurry and I'm not planning on doing a full-on color grade, I just need it to look somewhat good from the get-go. And the thing about this is, in the past, we've had to manage this using LUT files, which do like a technical conversion, and you would see things like slog3 to 709 conversion LUT or something along those lines. Now, with tone mapping, I can actually take this timeline, and there's one additional step that I need to do here. But before I show you that, again, I'm going to sequence settings, making sure I'm in a working color space, in this case 709, and I'm making sure auto tone map media is turned on. Now, because a lot of editors still want to work with these LUT files, working with and using tone mapping for log footage is entirely optional. And so this is something that's found in either the project settings or the production settings under the General tab. If I come down here to the bottom, you'll see Auto Detect Log Video Color Space is an option that I can turn on. But by turning this on, you should see that now the image kind of has life to it. The colors are rich. It looks the way it looks the way a good shot should look. And if I scroll through a number of different clips here, some of these are from different cameras, you can see again, just really nice rich color applied across the board to each of these different clips. Now, what's great about this, and I'll just demonstrate this, you probably want to look at the scopes here than the image, because again, putting this on YouTube, it's probably going to get blown out. But I'll go ahead and click on a copy of this that I have in a Rec 2100 timeline. So this is where shooting in log is really awesome, because you can create an HDR version of this footage, and now this is being mapped into this HDR space. You can see values are now stretching above 100. So if I go into like this particular shot, if I find the same shot, you can see the scopes are showing that the values are staying between 0 and 100 for the Rec 709 timeline. And for the Rec 2100 timeline, you can see that the values are jumping up, but there's a nice smooth curve here. Again, on my XDR display, this looks fantastic. It's got that pop, that brightness and saturation that we've come to expect from HDR footage. So, the one thing about all this right now that is still missing is, and I get a lot of questions about this, is why do I work with footage in Premiere? I love the way it's looking in Premiere, but it doesn't look good when I export to QuickTime Player, or it looks different. It's not the same. Or what about when I upload to YouTube? Why does it not look the same? Now, to show you this is not shipping in the 23.6 version, but it is something you can play with in the beta of version 24. And so keep on the lookout for when version 24 ships. This will be the new standard for finding a lot of these different settings. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the beta, which again, the beta is available publicly today. If you go to your Creative Cloud desktop application and find the little beta apps icon, you can download the beta. You can have it on your system at the same time you have the shipping build. Something that is coming in version 24, or maybe a later version, is under the Lumetri Color tab, we are adding a Settings tab. And so what this means, all the settings that you look for in preferences, like display color management, extended dynamic range monitoring that I mentioned earlier, are now found under the Lumetri panel. As I move down further in here, I can see the project settings. And again, this is where I can turn on that auto detect log video color space. It's still in the old location, but this is now sort of like a one-stop window to give you access to all of these different settings. Source clips, I can look at what the actual color space is of my source clips. I can also look at what my sequence is set for, and I can turn that on and off on an as-needed basis. So I'll go ahead and just turn this back on here so that I have that turned on for my sequence. And then inside this, it also exposes newer additional controls, things like being able to change the tone mapping method. So these are things that we're looking for moving forward to give you even more control of how this automatic tone mapping is working. You can kind of tweak it based on how it looks with your footage. Now, the one thing I wanted to point out here that I'm super excited about is the reason footage can look a little bit different out of Premiere is Premiere is following the broadcast standard for its viewing display. It's using broadcast gamma, and gamma is kind of a curve that the only thing I can kind of sort of compare it to is something like contrast. It has to do with the curve between the brightest and the darkest parts of the video. It's not contrast, but you can kind of sort of think of it in that way. And that's usually what people are trying to describe to me when they're saying, hey, it looks a little different when I play this back in QuickTime Player, or it looks a little different when I upload it to YouTube. So in the past, we've really stuck to the Rec. 709 specification. That's a hard engineering specification. It specifies a 2.4 value for gamma. And the problem has been is not everybody outside of broadcast uses 2.4 gamma. So we're really excited to now have this new viewer gamma option. And you can see here that there's three options: 2.2 for the web, 1.96 for QuickTime. So what this will do is give you the ability to set your gamma to match one of these specifications, so that if where you are delivering to, you're required to provide a deliverable that somebody is going to watch in QuickTime Player and make color decisions based on that. It's not going to broadcast. If it's going to YouTube or other websites, you might want to use the 2.2 gamma option, so that, again, what you're seeing in Premiere and what your output will look like on those devices should match identically. We hope this helps. Please stay tuned for more videos. Like and subscribe if you can. Thanks again for watching.